Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever looked at the economy and wondered why it's always on a roller coaster? Huge booms followed by painful busts? Well, today we're going to jump into a classic economic theory that tried to solve that exact puzzle, the Harrod Domar models. All right, so here's what we've got on tap. First, we'll unpack the core problem, this whole idea of steady growth. Then we'll look at the solutions cooked up by two economists, Domar and Harrod. After that, things get a little dramatic as we see how their models are balanced on a knife edge. And finally, we'll wrap up by asking, do these old ideas still mean anything for us today?
So first things first, the big question is, how can an economy just grow smoothly, without all those disruptive ups and downs?
I mean, is steady, stable growth even possible? This is the exact question that kept economists up at night in the years after Keynes. The Harrod Domar models were their big attempt at cracking the code. Now, the key to this whole puzzle, the main character in our story, is investment. But here's the catch. Investment plays a really complicated, two-sided role in the economy.
Yeah, you can think of investment as a double-edged sword. On one side, when a company builds a new factory, it creates jobs and pays salaries. That creates income, which boosts demand for goods and services. But on the other side, that new factory also increases the economy's ability to produce stuff. It boosts the supply.
And that is the tricky part. For everything to run smoothly, the growth in demand has to perfectly, and I mean perfectly, match the growth in supply. If those two get out of sync, even by a little bit, the whole system just goes off the rails.
Okay, so how do you keep this thing balanced? Well, let's first check out how an economist named Domar tried to solve it. Domar's question was actually pretty straightforward. He just asked, okay, what's the magic number? At what exact speed does investment need to grow so that demand and supply stay in perfect harmony?
And what he came up with was this formula. It looks a little complicated, but the idea is simple. He said the rate at which investment needs to grow depends on two things: how much people in that country tend to save and how productive their capital, their factories and machines, actually is.
All right, now let's bring in Sir Roy Harrod. He was wrestling with the very same problem, but he came at it from a slightly different angle.
So Harrod's big idea was that there are actually three different growth rates we need to worry about. First, there's the actual growth rate. That's just what's really happening in the economy right now. Then you have the warranted rate, which is the sweet spot that makes business owners feel like they invested just the right amount. And finally, there's the natural rate, which is basically the speed limit for the economy, set by things like population growth. For Harrod, the secret sauce, the magic formula for steady growth, was making sure that the actual rate of growth was precisely equal to that warranted rate. But, and this is a huge but, this is where things get really intense. And honestly, it's the biggest problem with the whole model. Harrod himself said it best. He called this perfect balance a knife edge. And man, was he right. It's incredibly fragile, super unstable. Think about it like this. If the economy grows just a tiny bit too fast, faster than that warranted rate, it doesn't fix itself. Instead, it spirals into out-of-control inflation. But if it grows just a little too slow, it doesn't bounce back. It spirals the other way, into a deepening depression. Any small mistake gets bigger and bigger over time. Okay, so you're probably thinking, with a problem that big, why are we even talking about these models today? Are they still relevant at all?
Well, even though they both kind of land in the same unstable place, how they get there is a little different. Domar is really focused on that dual role of investment. Harrod, on the other hand, is a bit more interested in the psychology of it. What makes entrepreneurs decide to invest more or less? And look, these models are far from perfect. I mean, critics have had a field day with them. They assume all these things are fixed, like the savings rate or technology. They pretend prices don't change and that the government doesn't exist. I mean, come on, we know the real world is way messier than that. But despite all those flaws, their biggest contribution, the reason we still study them, is that they gave us a really simple, powerful idea for economic planning. They basically said, look, if you want your economy to grow by, say, 3%, and your capital is so productive that every $4 you invest creates $1 of output, well, then you have to save and invest 12% of your income. It's just math. So I'll leave you with this thought. Yeah, these models are old, they're simplistic, maybe even flawed, but don't they still teach us a really fundamental lesson that consistent, healthy growth doesn't just happen by accident? It takes real discipline. It takes a plan. What do you think?